And welcome to another episode of Strange Planet. Looking forward to this conversation. It's been a bit of a back and forth, but we're finally making it happen, and I'm delighted because this is a fascinating area. Something called systematic biblical paranormology, and that's quite a mouthful. But we're going to learn all about it, and here to unpack what this is all about is Ken Ammi. He's a longtime researcher and lecturer on issues pertaining to worldview philosophies and various sorts of religions. And in this capacity, he's posted thousands of articles on his website. He's been published in an apologetics journal and has been interviewed for radio and podcast programs. And one of his focuses is systematic biblical paranormology. And let me just give you his website here as well if you want to find out more. But also the website, the URL will be in the description, in the episode notes, and you can just click on it. But that's truefreethinker.com. Truefreethinker.com. Ken Ammi, welcome to Strange Planet. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I've not heard this term, biblical paranormology. Do you want to, let's just begin right there with the definition. What do you mean by systemic biblical paranormology?
I believe I coined that term. That's why you've never heard it before. So there's a somewhat known fact that someone said I was one of the leading voices in systematic biblical paranormology. And I said, well, it's easy to be one of the leading voices when you're pretty much the only guy out there. So I coined that term for a few reasons. So for example, we all know of theology proper, right? And then there's systematic theology. Okay. So theology proper would be the study of God, the theos. Mm-hmm. Strictly speaking, God himself. Whereas systematic theology would be all of the other ologies that come with it. So angelology, Satanology, cherubology, pneumatology, eschatology, soteriology, you name it, all of those. So that's what turns it into a system, right? So that you're not supposed to have all of these ologies that are disconnected from one another, but you systematize them. You make them all coherent. One flows from the other, right? Like a line of dominoes.
Right, right.
And so my focus was, well, there is God and there are we earth dwellers, but there's this whole in-between realm. And I wanted to know, what does the Bible say specifically about all of those beings? And so I set out to study all of those. And so that's why it's biblical and then systematic, because I tried to do the same as with theology, systematic theology, which is, again, not to have them all as standalone concepts, but is it possible to systematize them? And then paranormology, obviously the ology part referring to the study of. And then the reason I opted for paranormal is because I was talking to a friend of mine and discussing how I'm really enjoying the study of all those otherworldly beings. And I use the term supernatural. And he instantly stopped me and he said, nope, there's only one supernatural being, and that is God. And I was like, oh, yes, that's right. Because if the natural, everything that is not God was a creation of God. So he's technically the only actual supernatural being. Everything else is in the natural. And so then I opted for paranormal, which is kind of running parallel to our reality, is this otherworldly reality. So there you have it, systematic biblical paranormology, where I tried as hard as possible to just focus on what does the Bible say about those beings with as little commentary from me, as little as possible in terms of speculation. And, you know, if I have to speculate, well, we do, because there's so little that we're told about some of these otherworldly beings. But I always make sure I elucidate that this portion is a speculation of mine. Otherwise, I can actually go down the line and tell you what the Bible says about all of these beings. And the beings I'm talking about would primarily be angels, cherubim, seraphim, Satan, by extension, Nephilim. And then in some of my books, I even get into issues of Leviathan, is there a Lilith in the Bible?
Right, right,
And yeah, a bunch of demons. So all those categories of being, and that's actually a key concept, is that there are different categories of being. I'm sure we'll get into that
right.
in a bit.
You know, it's interesting because I'm Greek Orthodox, and I grew up in the United Church, and scant attention is given. You know, maybe some focus on angels, and we all know about the archangels and the cherubim and so forth. But scant attention, really, almost as if I don't know, not embarrassed, but it's a no-go zone. They don't want to talk about these other paranormal beings, if you will. But let me ask you, someone who's studying this, I mean, I read your very impressive biography, rather. What other skills and abilities do you bring to the study? I mean, do you speak or read ancient Hebrew or ancient Greek or anything like that?
Sadly, no. I had, when I was attending private Jewish school, I was obviously learning Hebrew. And then, unfortunately, I really had nowhere to use it. At least back then, I mean, my life was very different. So by the time I lived in Israel for 2 months, I could barely say a word. It was embarrassing, but so be it. But I would just refer to myself as a researcher. Okay. And that's why my books are research based. They're very black and white. They're the kind of books I would want to read. They're no fluff, no puff, no anecdotes, and it just look, here are the facts as well as I can express them.
Right.
That's the kind of reading I would like to do when it comes to subjects such as these.
Let me just run down a list before we dive into some of these paranormal beings. A list of your work here: an independent investigation of the Baha'i faith, the scholarly academic Nephilim and giants. What do scholarly academics say about Nephilim giants? Let's see, what else? We have Cain as Serpent, Seed of Satan, Volume 3, considering the claims of various promulgators of this theory, the occult roots of post-genderism, and a history of changes to psychiatry and psychology. The King of Bashan is dead, the man, the myth, the legend of a Nephilim giant. Noah's
Question mark?
Question mark, yes. Noah's Flood, The Deluge, Global or Local, Volume 1, an historical survey of views from BC to 80. So some, yeah, very scholarly works, almost encyclopedic in some regards. So let's begin with, well, first of all, tell me about to what extent the Bible focuses on the paranormal. What does it tell us about the paranormal?
That is a very, very good point to discuss. And it's very important because honestly, the more I read the Bible, the less I think of it as a text that is about theology proper, and the more I think about it as an anthropological text, because the main focus is humanity, our creation, our fall, our redemption.
Mhm.
Okay. And so anything else the Bible mentions about anything else is relatively brief. And the focus always comes back to how does that affect humanity? Because everything else somehow pertains to that we were created, to that we fell, and to that we will be redeemed. And so that's why there's times where I'll give you an example: seraphim, one single text, period. That's it, full stop.
There's only one text, one passage in the entire Bible, Old and New Testament, dealing with the seraphim.
Right. Now, I grant you, I derived out of that text as much as I could possibly squeeze out of it. But what I mean is, so yeah, the Bible, God was not interested in inspiring it to be all you've ever wanted to know about seraphim or any of the other beings. It's like, look, these beings are out there. They'll be mentioned when it's contextually relevant, but it's not a no, it's not an all you ever wanted to know. It's not a seraphim for dummies. And that means that the reason, again, going back to why systematic biblical paranormology, is because when we're told so precious little about something, we need to handle it very carefully, very carefully. And I've come to find that when I dive into an issue in exquisite detail, I end up finding out that other people who think they know that issue because of whatever memories from Sunday school or a sermon here and there, or maybe just a cursory watching of videos about it. Um, they think they're informed and they're not a lot, because I've come to determine that common knowledge are those things everybody knows, but nobody knows how anybody knows them.
Right. And they don't
So
know
we,
what they don't know.
yeah.
So tell me about the seraphim. Just a very quick story, and I've told this story before, so listeners, please forgive me. But my I have twin boys, and when one of them was, well, they were both like maybe 2.5, 3, just starting to form like sentences and so forth. And we were over at his godparents for Christmas. Maybe it was Boxing Day, doesn't matter. Anyway, we came out in the cold, and he immediately, I was carrying him in my arms. He immediately looked up, and I said, "What is it, North?" And he described seeing something. He didn't have the vocabulary or the knowledge. He didn't know about seraphim, but he described some sort of a winged being, and he said it has eyes all over it,
Wow.
eyes all over its wings. And was that a seraphim? Is that what a seraphim is described as, having eyes on its wings? I seem to recall that.
That would be cherubim.
A cherubim.
That is a fascinating story. Yes, that would be cherubim. So that's a,
Okay, my mistake. So let's get back to the seraphim first, and then we'll come back to the cherubim. What do we need to know about the seraphim? Give us the vitals.
well, now, when I discuss these things, I kind of like to throw in little passive aggressive jabs at the people I term pop researchers. And these are the people you're going to readily find online because they're extremely popular, but they're not necessarily credentialed in any field. Neither am I, incidentally. The reason I'm not a pop researcher is because I'm not very pop. I'm just a researcher.
The pop
um,
research, yes.
yeah. So I like to throw in, hey, by the way, this is what you're likely to hear out there, but it's not correct. So, for example, and as an Orthodox, you might find this interesting. So I hear references to seraphim angels. Okay, now that is a category error, and it violates the law of identity.
Mm,
Why? Because seraphim are seraphim, angels are angels. They're distinct categories of being. So are cherubim. Three distinct categories of being. They have different job titles, they have different job functions, and they look different from one another. So just like I wouldn't say bovines are a kind of human because we both live on Earth, well, neither will I say that seraphim are a kind of angel because their job description is different than an angel. They look different. They're titled differently. Why would we mash them together? So um, another thing that is pop about seraphim is that they're reptilian or serpentine,
wow.
which is really cool to talk about. It's really exciting stuff. But one thing you might find is the Bible, maybe it's just too boring in what it actually says. But I'll tell you, um, the reason that that is claimed is because in the text where God sends poisonous snakes to bite the people, right? The one where Moses ends up making the serpent on the pole, right? Okay, so those serpents are referred to by the term seraph. So therefore, the jump is, well, seraphim are these otherworldly beings. Therefore, they are serpentine. And so that's a basic linguistic error because the text actually refers to seraph nahash. It's the nahash part that refers to a serpent or a
Right,
snake,
right.
not the seraph. Okay. So now, if I forget, let's get back to the root word seraph. So now, seraphim, we find them in Isaiah 6 exclusively. And one thing that we can know about them instantly is they don't have any serpentine features, period. They are described as having 6 wings. And let me try something interesting here. Can you picture 6 wings on a being?
Wow, I can't imagine where is the room? There's no room for six wings. I guess you could have two on the head, two on the. Yeah, I suppose I could.
Okay, now let me ask you this. What sort of wings are you imagining?
I guess I'm imagining, kind of a feathered wing similar to
Exactly,
like a
right,
like a raptor, like a big eagle's wing or
right.
something.
So see, to
Tremendous
me, that's
span,
interesting. It's
tremendous
interesting.
wingspan. Yeah,
So let's think about the psychology here. We hear the word wing, and yeah, it is natural, especially because of depictions, that we think of feathered bird-like wings. But we're not necessarily told that. For all we know, the wings are like a moth or a butterfly or a dragonfly or maybe a bat, or what. Would that be too creepy? And why would we think that's creepy, right?
right.
So we have no idea. Well, it's just wings. But I just wanted to use that as an example of the sort of things that we jump to as conclusions.
Right,
When we
right,
backtrack, we're like, well, how did I get there? I got zero data to get there. So there's really nothing there. They have wings. We don't know what they look like. We don't know how big they were, nothing. Okay, so there's that. We know they had faces. So apparently a head, because with two of their wings, they were covering their faces. We know they have feet. Okay, serpents have feet, faces and heads, but they don't have feet. With two, they cover their feet, and with two, they're flying around the throne of God, singing Kodesh, 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 right? Holy, holy, holy. And so that's their basic description. We don't even know what their bodies look like. Oh, sorry, that they do have hands and conceivably arms. So I would feel safe, again, speculation mode, that they're basically humanoid in form, because if they have hands and feet, it's logical and biological to assume they have arms and legs attached to them, and they have a torso from
right.
which their wings apparently proceed, and then the head with a face. So there you go. And that's essentially all we know about them. So, okay, back to the root seraph. Why are these serpents being referred to as seraph, and why are these beings referred to as seraphim? And incidentally, I'll just throw this in for fun. The im ending in Hebrew word is male plural. Okay. So these were poisonous serpents. And what the seraph is telling you is that there's a special feature of these serpents. They were poisonous. And so when we look at seraphim, what we see them doing is going to the fiery altar in heaven, picking up a coal, a burning coal, and putting it in Isaiah's mouth as a form of cleansing. So to me, that's the correlation. It has nothing to do with serpentine features. It has to do with being fiery. So why were the serpents for fiery? Because when you get bit by a poisonous serpent, there's a fiery sensation, like
Right,
the
right.
burning of the bite of the venom. And so to me, that's how I made sense of it, is we see these particular beings having something to do with that altar. And, just to make up a term that I could throw into one of my books, I referred to them as keepers of the eternal flame, just because I thought that sounded cool.
Very cool. What is their role specifically? Do we know?
What we get is that they fly around God's throne praising him, his holiness, right? Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. And that they have something to do with the function of basically the heavenly temple, right, where there was an altar that would fire, and they
Right.
have something to do with the function of using its coals to cleanse.
All right. Um, Now, are you also relying on documents or literature outside of the Bible, or are you simply basing it on what's in the Bible, what we're told from the Bible?
Okay, so I did publish a book called The Apocryphal Nephilim and Giants. So that one is specifically all non-biblical. And I did publish a book, uh, boy, it's funny when you started reading my book titles, I wondered how far you would go, because I published like 64 books, and I was like, I wonder how many he's gonna. We
That's
could be here an
remarkable.
entire hour just reading titles.
Exactly.
So honestly, there's a title I don't even remember how I titled it, but it's 2 millennia's worth of commentary by Jews and Christians about all these kind of beings. But again, if we're talking systematic biblical theology, then our context tonight is strictly biblical.
All right, we're going to take a quick time out, Ken. Come back and we'll talk about cherubim and angels and Satan, demons, you name it. Back with more of my conversation with Ken Ammi right here on Strange Planet. Don't go away. Every new season, we find a reason to improve our lives and our health. And C60 Evo organic edible oils deliver noticeable benefits quickly. A spoonful in the morning delivers energy and endurance all day long. And I sleep deeper and wake up feeling refreshed because C60 ESS60 works. Carbon 60 received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1996 when it was used for industrial applications. C60 Evo's ESS60 is a breakthrough technology upgrading C60 to be safe for human and pet consumption. ESS60 has been called a miracle molecule because of the physical and mental benefits people are enjoying. Their lab has a proven track record of 31 years and thousands of happy customers across the world, just like me. So, treat yourself, your friends, and your family to C60 Evo and use my link, EVRS, to get 10% off your first order. Again, my link, EVRS, to get 10% off your first order. And we are back with Ken Ammi, longtime researcher, lecturer on issues pertaining to worldview, philosophies, and various sorts of religions. Why don't I work in a couple of extra titles here? Because you're incredibly prolific. Hollywood Aliens and UFOs, third showing, Close Encounters of the 666th kind, or 666th kind, I should say. Let's see, Bible encyclopedias and dictionaries on angels, demons, Nephilim, and giants from 1851 to 2010. Folks, there's like 6 pages of books here on Amazon, so maybe a little bit later I'll refer to some others, but incredibly prolific, Ken. So let's talk about the cherubim. Again, these are not angels. This is a different classification. These are different beings. Who or what are the cherubim?
So cherubim are mentioned more often than we might think. Actual physical description of them comes exclusively from Ezekiel chapters 1 and chapter 10. And there may be, there's a very challenging text in Revelation. I don't even think we want to invest the amount of time it would take to describe that, but I'll throw it in generically, let's put it that way. So these, as in terms of physical description, 4 wings, hands under their wings, feet that are described as being straight and would not feet, but like maybe hoof-like feet, hooves, and interestingly, 4 faces. Okay, so they would be human, lion, and either vulture or griffin, some sort of predatory bird, and bull or ox. Incidentally, you might find your Bible might have it as you read along Ezekiel, when he describes the faces again, it might list one of the faces as being the face of a cherub, which to me has to be a textual issue, because if a cherub has 4 faces and one of those faces is the face of a cherub, then what? There's another 4,
Right.
and then another. It's like fractal geometry, right? It's
Right.
just 4 and 4 and 4 and 4 and 4.
Interesting. Right. Yes. Excellent point.
Yes.
And the cherubim have the eyes on covering the wings.
Correct. Now,
Yeah.
so in the scholarly literature, don't you know, they are generally described as throne guardians. And I might remove the throne part because, yeah, they are generally depicted as, in essence, traveling with God's mobile throne. But guardian would be more like it. Because, for example, think about when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. Okay, who was stationed to keep them from coming back?
A cherubim.
Exactly, it was 2 cherubim. So they're guarding right there. And even the root of the word for the sword that they had that spun every which way, even that word shares a common root with the word for cherubim, cherub, So even that, so that's an interesting aspect of their job function. And um, also, we do see that they were depicted as images in some of the paraphernalia for the temple, the sheets. And then Solomon even took it upon himself to make like 10 feet tall cherubim that would actually statuary that would stand within the temple. So somehow there was the knowledge of their appearance, because obviously, if you're making an image, you need to know what they look like,
Right.
hopefully.
Right.
And most, very importantly as well, the top of the Ark of the Covenant,
That's right. The mercy seat.
the mercy seat, and on either side were cherubim. So this means, incidentally, you can throw out 99.9% of all depictions you've ever seen of the Ark of the Covenant, because they'll generally depict basically a human body with two wings each.
Right.
So that's it. That's, forget all that. They have to have four wings, four faces, and hoof like feet. If not, then it's just not. It's not correct.
Um, did they have? Do the seraphim and the cherubim, and we'll get into angels in a moment, but do those two classifications, do they have free will?
I would say yes. We'll get to that as we progress.
Free will, but not the nature to sin.
Mm, free will and the nature to sin is
And
what
the
I would
nature
say.
to sin.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
interesting.
yes.
Okay.
Now, but let me mention something that will become in a circuitous manner. It'll become very relevant to cherubology, which is that they're depicted as, again, accompanying God's mobile throne with what has been rendered as wheels within wheels. You remember
Yes.
that? Yeah,
Ezekiel's wheels. Yeah.
right. The Ophanim. And so that's a very, very important point. When we, if you want to discuss Satan, when we get to him, that'll become incredibly important to realize something about the interaction of the cherubim and the Ophanim. But I'm going to leave that as a little uh, paranormology grenade. Pull the pin and it's going to go off later. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Careful where you step. All right. So let's talk about the angels then, as completely separate from the cherubim and the seraphim. The angels, the messengers.
Yes, exactly. And that's part, again, so if we don't see cherubim and seraphim delivering messages, by definition, they're not angels. Forget what they look like, which is important, but just that alone would tell you, okay, something's off here. So angels, a very important thing to note about them is that you'll find people generally swap out the word spirit for spiritual. They'll use them interchangeably, where really a spirit proper is a disembodied being. Okay.
Right.
Where spiritual, a human being could be spiritual, but we are embodied spirits. So let me just back up a second. Again, a spirit proper, a spirit in and of itself is by definition disembodied, but it can embody, right? Like us human beings, our spirits, but not proper because we are embodied. Okay, so spiritual is different. It's more like a characteristic of a person
Right.
or a being or whatever. So that's important.
Well, I mean,
Now,
it's to suggest that, I mean, because we tend to have this kind of this cartoonish image of angels as being purely spirit. We think they're omniscient. They're everywhere. Um, where if I'm hearing you correctly, um, they can also be physical. They are physical beings. I mean, Abraham hosted the angels. They partook in food and drink. So is that where you were sort of going with that?
exactly. Very discerning of you, and I appreciate that. You're on point. So every time angels are described, they are described as looking exactly like human males, period, full stop. No wings. And let me throw this in. If angels are spirits, then why do we depict them looking like human beings with wings, for a bird-like feathered wings? Well, that's not in the Bible. Okay. That actually happened because in the early centuries AD, it came out of artistry. Painters and sculptors
Hmm.
wanted to figure out, well, if I'm depicting a scene and the angel looks exactly like a human, how am I going to distinguish him? And they put wings just to show that these are the angels.
Right.
That's where it came from. Likewise with halos, there's no such thing as halos in the Bible, but wings, angels with wings and halo, that came out of just an artists trying to figure out how do we send a message across, like, okay, in this painting, in this sculpture, or whatever it is, that's the angel right there. That's where that came from. So again, look exactly like human males and are described as performing physical actions.
Right. And they're also
Okay.
described as being, or maybe they're not. I have this impression that they are beautiful.
I would say that because loyal angels are not fallen, then yeah, they would be like, again, this is speculation, but they would be like the model human, right? Just if you could imagine a model human, like that's quintessent human.
Right.
Their pores are so clean, you know.
Right. 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 Beautiful on the
Steve,
inside and the
yeah,
outside.
Stephen, right before he's stoned to death, it said his face was like an angel, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, there's just something about him that was glowing, like you hear about pregnant women are glowing, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So when they're appearing and not wanting to hide their identity, that's another issue. Then yeah, they would be. They look exactly like humans, but you would say, "Wow, that is a exquisite human," right?
Right.
If you
And
didn't
then
know any better.
there's also a hierarchy of angels, right? There's archangels and um, different levels. Maybe we can get into touch on that briefly when we come
Yeah.
back. Ken and me, I'll
Okay.
take another time out. Back with more of Strange Planet. Enjoying this conversation immensely. Hope you are too. November reminds us to be thankful and focused on boosting our radiant health before winter. And I use a potent remedy that's improved the quality of my life and deepened my sleep as well. I take C60 Evo olive oil every morning, and I have a lot more energy and mental focus all day long. My workouts are easier, and I have a lot more endurance. If you're into competitive sports, this is a game changer. Health is our greatest wealth, and Pura C60 ESS60 really works. ESS60 is a breakthrough technology delivering the carbon 60 miracle molecule for humans and pets. Check out the C60 Evo holiday gift collections for everyone on your list. They make amazing skin, lip, and hair repair serum that deliver noticeable results quickly. C60 Evo's lab has an impressive track record of 31 years and, of course, my personal recommendation. You deserve the best remedies on earth, and so do those you love. Buy direct from the lab and upgrade your life today. Use my code EVRS to save 10% off your first order. Again, my code EVRS and save 10% off your first order. And we're back with researcher, author Ken Ammi, and we're talking about, well, it's a term he has coined, systematic biblical paranormology. So if you're talking about God, we're talking about the supernatural. If you're talking about all things under God that he created that are part of nature but not outside of nature, then we're talking about the paranormal. And right now we're focusing on the angels. So the as you described them, they're almost indistinguishable from man, except I guess they have maybe a bit of a radiance about them. Um, they have, I'm guessing, super strength. Are they fearsome?
They can definitely get the job done in terms of taking on like entire armies. Yeah, no problem.
Right.
So I wanted to fine tune something before we get to the hierarchy,
Yes.
which is that okay? So a lot of people think that angels are spirits proper, disembodied spirits, and that they change shape or the morph, take on human bodies when they need to appear to us. Okay, that doesn't exist in the Bible. Just period, full stop. You might have a version of the Bible where in Psalm 104, verse 4, it says that he makes his angels spirits. But there's a reason why a bunch of versions more correctly have it as winds. Okay, because what's interesting is this is very relevant. In Hebrew and Greek, there's a word that can either be spirit or wind or breath. Okay, so Hebrew ruach and Greek pneuma. Now that's important because as you read Psalm 104, the context is correlations to natural phenomena. So when you get to verse 4, you have to translate it as winds to correspond to the context of natural phenomena. It begs for you to do that. So then what happens is that verse gets quoted in Hebrews chapter 1. So again, your Bible should be reading Hebrews chapter 1 as spirit, and then Hebrews 1 plays off of that quotation to make a statement. So again, to be consistent, it has to refer to them as winds. Okay, so if I have every single time an angel is described, they're described as looking like human males and performing physical actions, and I have essentially nothing to go on in order to demand that they are spirits proper, then I'm not going to throw away the overwhelming amount of data I have because the one particular Bible I'm a fan of has the word spirit instead of winds. Plus, like again, there's no indication that they change shape or take on bodies, nothing like that whatsoever. So the conclusion is simple. They look just like human males having a physicality of their own, like a flesh of their own sort, which is unfallen.
Right.
And honestly, I think of them as most likely the way Jesus is post-resurrection, right? Physical,
Right.
but with added capabilities, right? Because angels, if they want to be visible, they can make themselves visible. And if they don't, they make themselves invisible. So there's these added capabilities that we humans don't have. But in terms of morphology, yeah, just like human beings. Now, if you want, let's jump to the hierarchy
Hierarchy.
issue,
Yes. Yes.
which it's pretty simple. I would imagine if there's an order, it goes like this: the angel of the Lord, and then archangel, and then I don't know what you want to call them, regular angels, right? I mean, that's pretty much it.
And
Now that
the archangels, there we know about Gabriel, we know about Michael, we know about Raphael. How many do we know?
well, the only one described as an archangel is Michael.
Ah,
I know that maybe in Orthodoxy you have Raphael. That's not in that's let me put it this way, that's not in certain canons. Let's
got
just
it.
leave it at
Got it.
that.
Okay.
But this will be fun. Okay, so how many angels are named by name in the Bible? And I know I'm blindsiding you, so I don't necessarily expect you to answer, but you just named two that are in the I don't know what to call it, standard canon, I guess. Michael, Gabriel, that's two for sure.
How many? So you're quizzing me? How many are named?
Yes.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say very few, maybe two.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say three for sure, one maybe.
Hmm.
The third one would be in Revelation 9, Abaddon, or aka Apollyon,
Ah,
right?
fallen
The
angel.
angel of the abyss.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one's easy to miss, but that's very specifically told to us. The maybe would be what is generally translated as wormwood. And that's only because it's referred to as a star,
Yeah.
and Revelation 1, chapter 1, does allow for when the context is fitting that you understand that a star refers to an angel. So that, yeah, that's a maybe.
Interesting.
That's a maybe.
I did not know that. Um, are they? I mean, they're not omniscient, right? They're not everywhere at once. How do they move around?
Well, that they are referred to sometimes as moving through the air, which, hey, I guess if Superman can do it without wings, so can they. But that would be one of their abilities is to not choose to be subject to the laws of gravity. Let's put it this way. See,
Right.
they have the ability to choose to not interact with the certain things that we are forced to by our nature, like being visible. We have to. They don't have to. They can just choose to.
Which order of angels interacts with humans? All of them?
Well, biblically, the angel of the Lord most certainly did. The archangel most certainly. Yes. That's interesting. Michael, maybe not, because he interacts with Satan, arguing over Satan. Moses' body. And then he is seen, I guess, lending a hand to Gabriel and then fighting a war against Satan and his angels. So maybe not. Michael may not actually interact with human beings, but again, doesn't mean he doesn't. It's just
Right.
that I can't point to a specific example. Gabriel most certainly does or did. He's interacting with Daniel and Mary, and other ones. So we could say that the what I call the regular angels, for lack of a better term, definitely do all the time. I mean, that would be regular for them, whether we know they're angels or not, of course, because remember, we might entertain angels unaware.
That's right. That's
And
right.
why? Well, because they look just like us. So if they want to pretend they're human, then you wouldn't really know the difference until something happens. So they let something slip.
The, the idea of a guardian angel, is that pop culture or is there some legitimacy to that scripturally or otherwise?
I would say it's scriptural, but exactly how it plays out, that's very difficult. So, for example, when Peter is freed from jail and he shows up where the apostles were and some of the disciples, and they think, oh, we thought it was your angel, right? And his angels will give charge, he gives his angel charge over you. So there is that concept of guardianship. Now, is it one per human? Is it one per family? Is it one per what we call cities and states? I don't know. I really have no idea. I would, if I had to just speculate way out there, I would imagine that they're over regions. How large is that region? I have absolutely no idea.
Okay. So we have to talk about something we talk about a lot on this program, and that is the fallen angel. Are they from a particular? I mean, these are the ones that rebelled, right? They rebelled.
Yes.
They wanted to run the show, take over the throne room, perhaps.
Uh, I would say maybe, but I don't think we have indication of that.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, I think it's important to keep in mind that there's only a one-time sin or of angels in biblically. There's only one time. Okay, so it's not like every now and then, oh, another group of angels fell, and a few years later, oh, and a century later. No, it's we only know of one fall or sin of angels. And well, if you ask me, that would be recorded in Genesis 6, what I term the Genesis 6 affair.
Right.
And that's pretty obvious. Particular, just a really direct line would be Jude and 2 Peter 2, where they, if you combine what they're saying, they're correlating the sin of angels to sexual sin, and they're placing it in the days before Noah.
Right.
So I mean, if they're not talking about Genesis 6, I don't think anybody would have any idea what they're talking about. Let's put it that way.
Right. This is the chapter where they talk about taking the daughters of men, what, by
Right,
negotiation, by force, maybe both, and producing um, offspring, right? Hybrids.
right. And so now if you plug in our biblical angelology into that affair, you see how there's no kind of issue with it. They didn't, there's no indication they had to take on bodies. They already had them. So how did they do that? The good old fashioned way, you know?
Right.
And why would they be missing, if they look like human males, why would they lack the key feature of a male's anatomy, right? I
Right.
mean, everything's there. And now, if you ask the logical question, well, why would God create them with that sort of plumbing if they really weren't supposed to be using it?
Right.
I guess I'll answer you that when you tell me why he put the forbidden tree in the garden when no one was supposed to eat of it. Hey, but there it is.
Well,
Just
because
just like,
it's the beginning and the end, so he knew how the movie was going to end before
of
he even
course,
made it. So
granted,
yeah.
the way I think of it is, look, I'm sexually compatible with billions of women, billions, but I'm not supposed to be except for one because I'm married. So
Right.
there you go. Why do I have this anatomy when I can't use it on billions of women? Well, because there's an appropriate function for it, even if that function is that you're essentially celibate. uh, I mean, I don't know how else to express it, but
Right.
um,
Eh,
that's that explains itself. And incidentally, it explains why the two groups are exclusively male sons of God with exclusively female daughters of men. It has to be exclusively male sons of God because angels look just like human males. And let me throw this in just for fun. Are there angels who look like human females? Maybe there are, but my point is we're not told about them.
Right. Right.
That there it is. Yeah.
So the offspring, the Nephilim, um, were they a race of giants?
So that would beg the question, what does giants mean? Because that's a vague, generic, subjective, and multi-usage modern English word. So for example, I'm six even, maybe 6'1" with my shoes on. I've been called a giant many, 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 many times throughout my life. So is that what it means? Well, some people say, well, no, it's a few inches taller than the subjective parochial average. And some people say, well, no, it's various feet taller than the average. And some say, no, it's entire body lengths taller than the average. And then when you get to pseudepigrapha, such as First Enoch or Ethiopic Enoch, he has Nephilim being miles tall, okay? 3,000 ells. That's miles. That's great folklore. It's poor reality, but it's great folklore. So were they giants? Bottom line is Nephilim appear in two texts, Genesis 6, which gives us no physical description whatsoever. And incidentally, if you want to jump from that, the modern English word giant implies unusual height. That begs the question, how unusual? But let's just let it go. That would be what's known as a word concept fallacy. It's just assuming that one single word is supposed to be telling you more than it is actually telling you. And if you want, we could dig into the etymology there because it's very telling. The other text is Numbers 1333, which the pop researchers will pick up uncritically without interacting with the narrative. They'll pick up one single sentence and they'll use it as a premise upon which to build an all-encompassing grand theory. Okay, so the issue with number 1333 is that it's recording quote unquote evil report stated by unfaithful, disloyal, contradictory embellishers who made up 5 assertions about which the Bible knows absolutely nothing. Okay, and there's a reason why theirs is the only Paul's flood reference to Nephilim, because they were just making up a fear-mongering, scare tactic tall tale. And that's one thing they claim, is that Nephilim were so incredibly tall that in comparison, the Israelites look like grasshoppers. It's like, okay, but that is an absolutely unreliable source. So the way I put it is, were they unusually tall? I have absolutely no idea because we have no reliable physical description of them until, later for folklore, sure.
What
But
about
biblically,
Goliath? What about Goliath?
okay, so Goliath was a Repha, not a Nephil. Let's start there. Okay, and now I understand that the Masoretic text has him being 6 cubits in a span, just shy of 10 feet. Okay, but the earlier Septuagint and the earlier Dead Sea Scrolls and the earlier Flavius Josephus all have him at 4 cubits in a span, just shy of 7 feet. Now, why is his height actually told to us in the Bible? And incidentally, his is one of only 2 specified heights told to us in the Bible. Well, the issue, remember that I mentioned being tall or large or huge or all these terms, they're subjective to the parochial average. So what was the average? Well, the average Israel male of those days was between 5 foot and 5'3". Okay, that's males. So females were on average shorter. So when you're like 5 foot even, 5'1", 2 or 3, and this guy's just shy of 6 feet, yeah, that's a pretty. I'm just shy of 7 feet. Sorry, yeah, that guy's pretty impressive. A sight to behold. Yeah, sure. It's just like I'm 6 foot tall. If I'm standing next to a pro basketball player, none of whom quite reach 8 feet, but they're almost there. Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who's 6'3", and it's noticeable to me when I'm talking to her. I'm like, wow, she's taller than me. That's pretty tall.
All right, I want to squeeze as much of this in as we can here. We got about 8 minutes. Um, when my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, when a Nephilim died, the Nephilim's spirit became a demon. Is that correct?
That is what I'm going to term folklore from millennia after the Torah. Okay. I think it was a good guess, but it's not biblical. I think it was a good guess, but to me, it didn't quite do the job. So I'll tell you my theory very, very quickly, and I've outlined it in my books. But my theory pulls all the biblical data together to give us a biblical concept of what demons are. And in my mind, so we begin with angels being physical beings. Jude and Peter tell us that the sinful ones were incarcerated. Okay. So now my theory is that the demons are actually the disembodied spirits of angels. So their bodies are incarcerated, their spirits are roaming the earth, wreaking havoc. And that actually, I wrote a peer-reviewed paper for a Christian parapsychology journal, and I explained something about the characteristics of these beings and how it explains a lot about them. So, for example, why are they specifically terrified of being sent into the abyss? Well, because if they did, then they would re-inhabit their angel bodies, and then they're stuck down there doing hard time for who knows how long, decades, centuries, millennia. And why is it that they seek to embody, such as through possession? Well, because being embodied is something that's natural to them, and they want to sense that again. Why do they want to be worshipped in the form of idols, which are images? Again, to see themselves depicted physically. So there's a lot about them that is explained by recognizing them as disembodied angels.
All right.
And incidentally, you don't find demons pre Genesis 6, and you don't really find them really after the release of what I think are the fallen angels in Revelation 9. So go ahead.
All right. So, Satan. Is Satan the same as Lucifer?
Now, remember when I talked about the names of the biblical angels? And I'm sure somebody was thinking, well, you left out Satan or Lucifer. It's like, well, but he's not an angel. He's a cherub. Okay. Now, remember I talked about how something about the cherubim and Ophanim would become very important.
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, I would say that. Okay. So the word Lucifer, that would be, I've written about it in my books, but it would kind of be distracting from our context, only because it would have to get kind of linguistically complicated to discuss that. But yes, let's just say yes, that's fair enough. Okay. So he's a cherub. We got to just apply our biblical cherubology to him, not angelology. So and I'll give you an example of why that's so very important. We're told that he entered Judas, right? Think about that. He entered into Judas. You don't see angels entering anybody, and and um, and Satan is not a demon. Okay, by definition, if you want to go the folkloric route, he wasn't a Nephilim. He wasn't a Nephil. And if you want to go with my biblical theory, he was not an angel. So, how on earth is a being that I'm saying is physical in its own physicality, how does he enter a human being? Well, now here's where you have to apply your biblical cherubology to a cherub. So, what we find out is that Ezekiel tells us that the spirits of the cherubim were in the Ophanim. Okay. So one of the capabilities of a cherub is that he can have his spirit leave his body and enter, in this case, I don't know if you want to call Ophanim beings or objects, whatever. And so when you realize that is a capability of a cherub, that is how Satan could enter Judas, because it's not a physical thing. He had the ability to move his spirit from his own body into Judas. You see, and this is why it's so important, like I emphasized at the beginning, to take the little bit that we're told and take it very carefully and apply it. Because otherwise you could invent all kinds of stories about how that could have happened. But it's like, wait a minute, you just need to apply what we're told about cherubim and you got your answer.
So Satan, the fallen angels, did they all come down sort of, is it Mount Hermon in Genesis 6? Is that where they came?
Okay, so I'm going to take us back just one step because you asked about free will.
Oh, yes.
Right. And so I would say, well, yeah, since angels sinned and Satan sinned, I would apply that to a free will decision. Right. The thing about Mount Hermon really comes out of Enoch, first Enoch, Ethiopic Enoch, again, millennia after the Torah. So is that where they came down? Well, I don't know. I don't really care. I mean, maybe, but that's not what we're told anywhere in the entire Bible.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
We're just told they came to earth somewhere abouts. Yeah.
Where is Satan and the fallen angels now?
So the fallen angels are, in my theory, they're physically incarcerated and spirits are roaming the earth. Satan is just running about the earth and still has access before God, incidentally. Okay, so the way I would describe it is I believe that Genesis 3 records the action he took, which caused his fall. And then Genesis 6 records the actions the angels took, which caused them to fall. These are two different falls. But again, one is of a cherub, another is of angels, two different stories.
Right.
Even though Satan definitely had something to do, because in Revelation 12, he's depicted as a dragon whose tail sweeps a third of the stars, again, which we're allowed to think of as angels, and threw them to the earth. So he had something to do with it. But the motivation he had was different. He wanted to be as God. In terms of usurpation, incidentally, I always say it's good to be as God in terms of emulation, but not in terms of usurpation. Okay. Whereas their motivation, honestly, it seemed like nothing more than earth girls are easy, baby got back, they were attracted, and Satan had something to do with, go ahead, guys, go for it. But Satan, as we see in Job chapters 1 and 2, for example, he got fired from his original job as a throne guardian, or a guardian in general. And now he is roaming the earth, causing havoc and reporting back to God. Whereas when you get to Revelation 12, there's a war in heaven. And incidentally, a lot of people will put this in primordial time, right? Before God created human beings, there was this heavenly rebellion way back then. No, I don't see that whatsoever, because I don't know about the rest of Revelation, but Revelation chapter 12, it's fairly obvious that it's chronological. And that war is a post-Jesus ascension war. Now, did it happen already, or is it yet to happen? I don't know. I would imagine it's yet to happen. But what you see is that when Satan and his angels lose that war is when he's cast to earth and he's stuck on earth. That's why he's so upset. He's no longer allowed to come before God. You're done, buddy.
That's yet to happen, most likely.
I would think so.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
Ken, I learned a lot. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this again. There's so much more to discuss.
There is, but wow, did we ever cover a lot of ground? We hit, angels, cherubim, seraphim, Satan, demons, and even a little bit on Nephilim. That's not bad.
All right. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks. God bless you.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.